Hi, welcome to our Consumer Healthcare Training Academy webinar series 2022 and beyond. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to see you all from different parts of the world. We are so happy you can be here with us today. Our today topic is caregiving, hidden opportunities for brands and for workforces by Debbie Howard. Long before COVID, there is another healthcare crisis brewing: family caregiving, a job that is unpaid and fundamentally untrained. Family members take on responsibility of caring for their aging loved ones. There is a huge opportunity for companies to help supporting these family caregivers to keep their care receivers safe and comfortable as they age and to keep themselves healthy and whole. Today, we will explore those opportunities and solutions to this caregiving crisis from both brand strategies and from employer perspectives. But before we start, I would like to encourage you to think about these four questions while listening to our presentation and discussion. What excites you? What concerns you? What would you like to know more about? What ideas come to you while listening? And please feel free to pop your questions, ideas, and thoughts in our chat box. Our speaker and moderators will answer your question towards the end of our session. First, let me introduce you to our speaker of the day, Debbie Howard. Debbie is an author, speaker, a chairman of Carter JMRN, founder of AMI, and the caregivingjourney.com. She's also a former caregiver who served as both long distance and live in caregiver for her mom, while she was running her Tokyo based market research consultancy. This challenging experience inspired her to write a book based on her very own personal experience, together with stories of over 200 family caregivers from a wide variety of conditions. Today, Debbie utilizes her over 30 years experience as market research professional, combined with her personal caregiving experience to guide multinational companies in their exploration of global aging and caregiving opportunities with both customers and employees. Thank you so much, Debbie. We are so excited to have you with us today. Joining our session by our two moderators from the Consumer Healthcare Training Academy. Dave McCocken, our Senior Consumer Healthcare Training Academy consultant and trainer, and a Chief Strategy Officer of AI Agency. Dave is an exceptional storyteller with over 30-year experience as a brand strategist and market researcher, leading strategy planning in one of the world's largest advertising and communication companies. He is also an outstanding speaker with deep knowledge of good insight. He is invited to speak over 500 conferences globally, and no doubt, Dave is one of the most sought after speakers and market researchers. Last but not least, I would like to introduce you to Steve Sowerby, the founder of X Potential and the co-founder of the Consumer Healthcare Training Academy. With his belief that brand is the most important asset of the business, and people is the most important resource in the organization. Over 16 years, Steve was invited to speak and train teams and individuals around the world in both healthcare and non-healthcare industries. Without further ado, everyone, please help me welcome Debbie, Dave, and Steve.
Thank you so much, Aim. Great. Join me.
Thank you so much.
It is a real pleasure to have you with us, Debbie, because this topic of caregiving is somehow one of those invisible parts of health and wellness. We hardly ever really talk about this in the industry. The millions of individuals who are caring for their families, who are caring professionally, who are caring for friends in some cases, who really without them, you might argue that the health industry would absolutely collapse, because they're the ones that really are providing that primary care on a daily basis to individuals. So
We could definitely argue that for sure.
yes, we could certainly argue that. So really, really great. And good to have you as well, Ben.
Yeah, and what was strange was that as I was waiting for us to start recording this session, I've been listening to a local radio station here in Sydney, and they were actually interviewing caregivers and a couple of people that were in care. And it was all about the fact that they were saying that Australia, with a population around 25 million, needs 50,000 more permanent full-time caregivers. We're that short of people in that role. So, you know, it amazingly topical, Debbie, that was just on the radio here literally an hour ago.
I'm so happy to hear that. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Well, it was good. It was good the topic was there. Actually, the interviews were very sad because of the situations of the lack of people doing it, the lack of government awareness, etc. And I'm sure we're going to get into all of that in this fantastic session we're going to have with you. Yeah.
It can be a sad topic, but let's make it joyful. Actually, you know, understanding what's going to happen in the future and facing it and making a plan is one of the ways that we can all do a better job with it. It doesn't matter if we're talking about caregiving or a business plan or whatever it is we're doing. Yeah. Yeah. I go at it from a very positive viewpoint. I know there's a lot of sad stories. Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I think here we're here to investigate how we as an industry can support and how we can maybe adapt communication and in some cases even products and solutions that can actually make caregiving actually so much easier and more joyful, as you say, Debbie. All right.
Yes. Okay. And please ask any questions that come to your mind while we're going. And I know our listeners are going to type in the chat about it.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So I'd just like to go over a little bit the macro trends in the background. And Dave, you already mentioned the shortage of healthcare workers. That is a global problem. And absolutely, it is one of the things that's driving many people like you and me to take care of our loved ones. And they could be parents, they could be friends, as you mentioned, Steve. They could be aunts or uncles, grandparents even. We're seeing people having to step up across the board these days. And one of the reasons is, let's see if I can get my slide to advance. There we go. So one of the reasons is that we are having this kind of flip-flop in the trends of aging in the world. So we've got the green line are the people over 65. That's increasing in the world, whereas the younger people in the births are decreasing. That is happening. There's nothing that can be done about it. And I might add it, they've known it was happening for a long time.
Yeah.
It's just that it's gotten so bad now that, you know, we have to do something about it. And, you know, we have this situation where our wonderful medical and healthcare advances have allowed us to live longer. But of course, that means there are other problems that happen as a result. So, you know, I spent 30 years of my life in Japan from 85 to pretty much just recently before COVID. And one of the interesting things is that I was interested in the aging trend early on in Japan because it was very evident even back in 1985. Yeah. We have close to 30% of the population of Japan at 65 or older. That's an amazing statistic. It's the most aged society in the world. Italy is not far behind, and Germany not far behind that. Of course, then we've got the UK, the United States, and Australia. And we've got our Asian countries at a little bit lower percentage, but it's still quite high as a percentage of the population being over 65. And I might also add that whereas it took the Western countries something like 5 or 6 decades to reach this magnitude of aging, the speed of aging is compressed in the Asian countries, and it's happening much, much faster. So all of the problems we're talking about today, what I've tried to do is round up the research results so that we can look at sort of bare minimums. So whatever you're seeing is the bare minimum of the problem as it is reported. It's not often as well researched in the Asian countries. So most of our numbers are for the US and Europe and Oceania, but I have got spot numbers for the Asian countries, and they're all
Yeah.
tracking. They're all tracking the same. So I think I just want to let everybody know that that's what we're doing here with the numbers.
Yeah. Debbie, I can just really vouch for that. Here in Thailand, recently we did some research, and we showed that 12% today. Yes, that's about right for us here in Thailand, but that's going to double in literally the next 5 years. We are aging very rapidly. Many people think that Asia is a very young population. Traditionally, we think of the markets as being really young, dynamic markets. Indeed, they are. But actually, we have a huge proportion of the population which are going to be aging. And as I said, maybe 20 to 25% in the next few years will be over 65 in Thailand. So.
Yes, well, this is definitely a trend that is solid. It's been going on for a long time, and it's expanding really fast now. So I think it's really something that all companies should be aware of for many reasons. Yeah. So in America, we have the dubious distinction of having really high lifestyle diseases. So we have 85% of our older adults over 65 with at least one chronic condition. So we're talking about heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, even cancer is included in that statistic. And 60% have two or more, which is quite a lot. And it doesn't look so bad when you go to some of the other countries. The statistics do not line up. I'm telling you, I've ripped my hair out trying to line up global statistics, and they just don't. I don't know why, but anyway, they don't. But what I think the message here is that no one is escaping this trend of chronic conditions in old age, because 1 in 3, even in Asia, where people tend to be a little slimmer and suffer from the lifestyle diseases a little bit less bad, it's still bad. It still happens as a natural part of the aging process. And that brings me to mention your speaker a few weeks ago at CHC, who talked about not just aging, but aging well. He talked about lifespan versus health span. And I think that was a really interesting thing that he said, because, if you're 60-ish, you can expect, about 21 years more of life by the statistics tables, but only about half of those are really good, right? Because if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to have some of these other conditions. And of course, that's when people have to step in to help you.
Yeah. No, and that was a really shocking stat. Dave, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, thanks, Debbie, for reminding me that I should be scared.
We should all be scared, Dave.
Although
we should be very afraid.
Although, as you both know, I'm in absolutely perfect condition. So,
yeah, me too.
I wish.
But it is really scary, because that healthy lifespan is 10 years younger on average around the world than your lifespan.
That's right.
That is it's a bit of a shock that, yes, I might live to 85, but from 75, my quality of life is going to be significantly reduced based on the current statistics. And I think what's an important foresight or important insight around that is that the more we take care of ourselves, and maybe the more that companies are finding solutions to help us to keep healthy, then we can maybe not increase the lifespan dramatically, but increase the healthy lifespan dramatically, which would be obviously a benefit for us in terms of quality of life, and a benefit for our families, because it would reduce maybe that time when we do need care.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of it has to do with living independently and being able to live independently, because if you lose your mobility, you're going to need some help. And if you you start you know becoming unable to really manage on your own, and maybe
Yeah.
you leave the burners on, and you become a risk to yourself
Yes.
actually at a
Yeah.
certain point. So it's a really important thing to stay in as good a shape as you can. That just goes without saying for all of us. It also goes it merits saying for all of us as caregivers, because they say that about 80% of us are going to be caregivers sooner or later. It already happened to me. I hope it doesn't happen again, but I think it will. It will, because it already has. So
Sure.
maybe I'll tell my story right now, just so
Yes,
we can.
please.
I actually was called back at the peak of my career at 54 years old in Japan, running my own business there, to South Carolina in the United States to care for my mom, who was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer suddenly at age 76, which is very, very young. No, I'm sorry, 74. Super young. And we never expected it. She was so healthy. She didn't take any medications. Lots of older people have bags of medication in the States. She had none of that, just vitamin C and you know vitamin E supplements. And it was a big shock to all of us. Fortunately, you know, the bad news is, yeah, I had to go take care of her, and I wanted to go take care of her. I'm the oldest of 3 girls, and my other 2 sisters we were working very well together, but their FMLA, their Family Medical Leave Act, time off had been exhausted after 1 year
Oh
of
my.
three of us spotting each other. So it's really quite amazing how fast that paid leave gets used up when somebody's really sick. And I was the only one with the wherewithal to go take care of my mom. That my sisters had to keep working at their jobs, and I owned my own company, and I had very good staff in place, and they were able to cover for me while I went home and ran my business in Tokyo from South Carolina off the dining room table. It was
Amazing.
also a good part of my story is that my mother had a plan with a will and all of her wishes very well outlined 10 years before she became sick. Now, that is, I calculate 5% of families in the world have that wonderful circumstance,
Wow.
because most families have absolutely not talked about this. They don't want to. Either the parents don't want to talk about it or the kids don't want to talk about it. And we didn't want to talk about it either. When my mom started that discussion, I think I was 45-ish. And I was like, no, 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 let's don't talk about that. You're not going to die. And, it's not a comfortable subject at all. But my mother forced us to do it. And if there are any parents listening, I highly recommend that you be big people and don't resist the conversations and make your kids talk about it, because it's so much better if you have a plan.
Yeah.
We had a plan. We had long-term health care insurance. My mother had an extra room with its own bathroom and shower in it for me. These things are almost unheard of in the world of caregiving. I had an optimal situation, and we're not rich or by any means, but I am super aware of how fortunate I was, and it almost killed me. Okay,
That,
emotionally,
wow.
physically, financially, even with all of those good things and good circumstances. And there was one other thing. What else? There was one. I guess I can't think of the other thing, but I'm telling you, I
Mm.
had an optimal situation, and it was
And
still
it was
super
still
hard.
very, very tough. And you see,
Oh,
yeah, sorry, Debbie, go ahead. Your
I
last.
remember the other one. The other one is my caregiving experience lasted 1.5 years.
Yeah,
The average is 4 years.
yeah.
And many people, if Alzheimer's and dementia is involved, 10,
Multiple.
15, 20 years.
Yeah, yeah.
So in my case, it was about as optimal as it could be. And maybe that's why I have the energy left to be able to
Right.
be out here talking about it.
No, and the sad thing is that yes, it was optimal, and I'm sure it's a privilege to spend that time with her. Absolutely, it's something that maybe in more developed countries we're losing. We're losing that time, and caregiving is if you like. Relegated or delegated, I don't know how you might want to call it, to care homes and
Outsourced.
Exactly. Whereas still here in Asia and the Middle East, where I did my growing up, it was very much a family's privilege to take care of their own. And
Yes.
here, as you say, I've got many friends in very high-powered jobs here in Thailand who are caregivers to their parents, and it's two full-time jobs, and it's very tough on them. But they wouldn't have it any other way. So they want to do it. How can we help them to actually do it easier and better?
Yes, and that's what we want to do today, and that's
Yeah,
why I've pretty much made this the rest of my life's work,
cool.
actually.
Very good.
So we mentioned Alzheimer's and dementia, and that is a huge challenge in our world. The current 50 million number worldwide is expected to triple by 2050. So if you see any opportunities to contribute to Alzheimer's and dementia research, we must fight this disease because it is killing us literally, and it's making families go through so much grief and so much pain on the way.
Yeah,
This is where you hear so many sad stories with Alzheimer's and dementia, and it's a whole other presentation for sure.
yeah, yeah. But Debbie, this is also one of those things where many of the caregivers don't have any particular training in how to deal. And Alzheimer's and dementia is one of those most difficult of conditions where perhaps a minimum of training and information and support to caregivers can make the whole experience that much better. It will not make it great, but in general, caregivers are probably unless you're a professional caregiver, your family caregivers are probably not trained at all, other than 5 minutes with the doctor and your family member. That's it.
Well, it's so true, Steve, and it's not just the Alzheimer's and dementia, although that is a great example. But I mean, there's Parkinson's, there's Lewy bodies, there's so many conditions that ALS. I look at, like, I'm a marketing person, right? What did I know about medications and titrating meds and even operating an oxygen tank under great duress, mind you, while my mother's having a coughing attack? I mean, these things are not they're not easy for anyone to do, and we are not trained for this. Just like we're not trained for parenting either, actually, by the way. But it's we don't know what we're doing. We do the best we can. We try to do it with love, and I wouldn't trade my experience for anything. But
Yeah.
it is a great opportunity for training. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
This is to your point, Steve, about different cultures and how they deal with aging. So this chart, I'll just give you a little walkthrough. So the one of the ones up here is Netherlands. So you can see that in the European countries, for the most part, and America here, we are having a higher percentage of elderly living alone in single households. We can see that goes way down for Japan, where we have more multi-generational households. Although even in Japan, multi-generational households have decreased over the last 30, 40 years. And then we get down into here, we get into sub-Saharan Africa, a little bit of Northern Africa, some Central and South Asia. These are more multi-generational, right? There is a higher incidence of multi-generational family living. And that means the families can take care of the elderly as they age, which is what we used to do in the States and Europe. That's what we used to do. So that has really changed over the years. And I think it's just important when we think about caregivers and caregiving, there are many, many things that are the same. I like to say it's the great equalizer. Doesn't matter your country or your ethnicity or anything like that. However, there are cultural differences, and we always need to be aware of those. When we look, I'm always interested in getting the numbers, right? What are the numbers? And when we look at the number of care receivers in the world, and let's just use 65 plus as a proxy for that, that doesn't mean everyone 65 plus needs care, but they are potential care receivers. And what happens in the care continuum is that you start aging and you start needing more and more help little by little. So at first you might just need someone to go to the doctor's appointment with you, so there's two sets of ears hearing whatever's happening there. And then later you might need somebody, like with COVID, you might need somebody bringing you your groceries so that you can avoid going to the grocery store. So, we've got quite a few people in the world here that's expected to more than double by 2050 in 30 years. And of course, I've estimated there's 500 plus million caregivers. That's very loose and probably very low, actually. But you can expect it to increase. It will be doubling, just like the aging, the care receiver number is doubling. So who are they? Let's look at who they are now. Again, I've used my research prerogative here to amalgamate several different studies. They are all super strong. They've been going on for years now, like as in 10 years or more. We know that among the caregiver universe, there is a higher percentage of females. That shouldn't be surprising to anyone. Females have been the caregivers of our world for a long time, but there are more and more males. What we may see here is that there may be a higher percentage of females in India, for example, than in the US, but like the numbers might tip a little bit that way. But generally speaking, we have higher number of in percentage of females, a little lower percentage of males. What we're seeing in the States is that the caregiver universe is spreading out. It's becoming everyone's job. And we've got the oldest caregivers here. You see the oldest taking care of the old. They're taking care of their mates, etc. I know a 74-year-old right here in Texas who was caring for her 95-year-old mom. And it's sometimes it's couples, but sometimes it's a 95 or older parent. This would be your core, what we call the baby boomers in the States, but I've put the age groups here because we don't call the groups the same thing in the different countries.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, around 53 to 73, that's the chunk, the biggest chunk of caregivers. But you've got a lot in the so-called Gen Xer area and millennials. And in the States, we say of 53 million caregivers in the States, and some people say 63, by the way, so the numbers are super mushy. I believe they're way underreported, so that I'm just disclosing that. They say in the States a full 25% of all caregivers are millennial aged.
Wow. So that number there would be between 24 and 39. So 23% of people 24 to 39 will be caring for their families. So, and that means working, caring for their families, maybe even caring for young families, not just caring for the older parents, but also caring for the kids. So
exactly.
That's three full-time jobs these individuals are holding down.
Exactly. Thanks for finding the one typo there, Steve.
Yes, that's okay. Don't worry.
So, but yeah, it's those the millennial and moving up into the Gen Xers those are what we call sandwich caregivers. So exactly what you're saying, Steve. They are caring for their parents and they're raising kids at home.
Yeah.
And we also have a growing segment of what we call youth caregivers. And these would be children 8 to 15 who are in the households that are where their parents are doing the caregiving, and they're often pulled in to help. And this is something that we all really need to be aware of as well, because it's difficult enough for an adult to deal with the emotionalism and the stress of caregiving, but for a young person, I mean, I know youth caregivers who literally were called into service when they were 12 years old and
Wow.
gave care to their father who had a stroke for 10 years, was taken out of
Sure.
school in America to because that was the only choice they had. The mom had to go out and make the money because the dad had had a debilitating stroke. They were told he would die in 6 months. He lived for 10 years. So my friend actually grew up as a caregiver for her father. So it's an amazing story, and we are seeing more and more of these situations. And what do they do? So 60% of them, and more than 60, work full time. If we add the part time in there, we're at 75, 80%. We are at 30% of every workforce, whether you are a large company or a small, medium sized enterprise. So it is a huge cut of the workforce. And imagine working 25 hours a week once you go home from work. It's
Yeah.
That's the kind of time we're talking about. And again, we already mentioned the 4-year length of time. So it's a really difficult job, and there are negative impacts. Now, I preface all of this too with it's one of the most honorable jobs that you will ever do. And it is my best job that I have ever done in my whole life. And I'm very, very proud of myself for bearing up and being able to do it. And I think I did a really good job. I think my mom was really happy and safe while she was dying, and we made the best of it. And we had some amazing times. And because I had lived overseas for all that time, it was really a gift at the
Yeah.
end of her life, as you said, Steve, to be able to get that time. Most of us as caregivers suffer from basic self-care. We can't sleep well. We neglect our own doctor's appointments. Many have depression, not surprisingly, and it's just it's a very difficult and lonely job. It's a very lonely job. Um, Over 1 in 5 feel their careers have been negatively affected. There's actually a stigma in the workplace. People are afraid to tell their bosses that they're caregiving because they're afraid they won't get promoted. There's a real hesitance to ask for help. And we even know statistically that when people use the paid time off, they don't use it for caregiving, they use it for childcare, or they use it for disability. They don't it's a really interesting dichotomy, actually. And yet many caregivers have had to reduce their hours working. They've had to leave their jobs once the care responsibilities become so great. And 30% at bare minimum feel financial pressure. The statistics show that every caregiver ends up spending money. It just can't be helped. I think the average is about $8,000 a year in America. But in America, this number of feeling financial pressure is 45%, for example. That's what I mean about the numbers being like amazingly high. And 21% feel their family relationships have been negatively affected. Caregiving is notorious for tearing families apart. Siblings have fights, things that you haven't thought about for 50 years come back to haunt
Yeah.
you. And it's not it takes a lot of um, mindfulness and love to stay open-minded and not go down that negative family relationship thing. It can be very, very difficult.
No,
Um,
I've experienced that also in our family, when there is always that question of when a family member may need to go into care. or stay at home. And it really does split families. Eventually they come back together, but at the time it was very, very tense.
It's these are very important and life changing
Yeah,
decisions,
indeed.
and they absolutely have the potential to tear families apart. That's why it's also, again, really good to talk about this before there's a problem,
Yeah,
because then you can discuss, and I was going to say fight, but you can do whatever you want when there's no pressure, right? But if your mother's laying in the hospital with a broken hip that just happened yesterday, and suddenly you have to start making these decisions, it is
or
not good. Yeah.
no,
So at least getting it out on the table as early as possible is
yeah,
definitely recommended.
yeah,
So I think one of the interesting and saddest things is that caregivers feel so unrecognized, that what they're doing, they know what they're doing is good, but they feel unnoticed, unrecognized for it. Because our society has decided that you're supposed to do that, right? And I think it's fine. We are supposed to do that, but I think we should recognize it. And I think we should recognize that unpaid caregivers in the US, and this is just a proxy for what's happening in the rest of the world, the the time that unpaid caregivers spend doing the caregiving has been valued at the annual budget of Medicare. It's like $470 billion. And that's at like 10 or $15 an hour, which isn't even
wow.
what you have to pay professional caregivers. So it's an amazing thing, and anything we can do as individuals and companies and society to recognize the role that people are playing is really, really appreciated by
Yeah,
caregivers, I believe.
yeah. And I think also, I don't know, Dave, if you would agree, it's like it's not just to recognize it, but to actually support it, whether it's through
Yeah.
training, whether it's through solutions, whether it's through products, whether it's through companies giving time off or allowing caregivers to work from home. I know we're going to talk about this later on, but I think we're so lucky here in Thailand that uh, generally companies are very open to this because everyone at every level of companies here in Thailand eventually will be caring for a family or are caring for a family member or have cared for a family member. So from the chief executive throughout the organization, everyone understands. And from my experience, and it's a personal experience across friends, this is something that is recognized and supported by companies.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think, in my experience, and Steve, I think it might be an anomaly what you're talking about in Thailand, and in most places, unfortunately, companies don't really see their role.
Hmm.
Um, Now, many companies may, because of certain individual circumstances, do things. But I'll give you the example I mentioned to the two of you a few days ago. Um, I was fortunate when I was in Japan to have a guy working for me who
Yeah,
unfortunately came down with ALS in his late 20s. Hero was a very gifted member of the staff. As he became ill, the company was very good in allowing him time off, etc., in supporting him. The thing I'd like to get across is that 10 years later, Hero is still alive. He's completely bedbound. His only thing he can do is control a computer screen with his eyes. He's been like that for years now. But the important thing is that company, McCann, the ad agency, still keeps him on the books.
that's
He's still
amazing.
paid a salary to be a planner.
That's
Not only that,
wonderful.
but the company, yeah, but the company, more importantly, we 11 years ago, we started an organization called End ALS, which was to help raise the issue of ALS in Japan and seek more government support for ALS sufferers. The thing is that the company not only personally supports him by giving him a reduced salary, but a salary, but they also have encouraged members of the staff to spend time working on campaigns that he develops advertising campaigns publicizing the ALS issue. So, when we talk about sometimes about caring and supporting the thing that companies can do, it's not just a case of allowing him and allowing different members of staff to support him. It's about the company actually getting behind what he wants to do and allowing that person, even in his much reduced physical state, to believe he's doing something important. And so I've been very happy. I should say, and I've got to give credit to McCann, my old company. I haven't worked for that company for 6 years myself, but when I left Japan, the local management guaranteed me that no, it will change. We will keep on supporting him. And to this day, even though they've gone through now 3 management changes, they're still doing it. But that's an exception. And the point is, I think most companies, and if you think about it, in Japan, as Debbie would know, in Thailand, in Australia, in the US, anywhere around the world, most companies actually don't know the situation of their employees. Most people, for a lot of reasons, are not going to go and tell the company officially, I'm a caregiver. And so it goes
very
under
personal.
the carpet, and it's very personal, and it's very hard to report. And part of that is because, yes, in some countries or in some organisations, that the company is basically not interested. But it's also because it's just not something that we've come to grips with. And I guess it's a slow burn change, which only discussions like this can help to identify.
Indeed.
It really is. It really is a slow burn change. And this one's been going, I mean, I have evidence that back in 1995, people in this space, in the nonprofit space, and human resources space, were saying this is the new employee benefit. 1995. That's it's quite unimaginable, but I feel even more compelled to keep at this because of it. I do feel it's a slow burn, and I'm going to show you some slides soon about how it's picking up some momentum right now, thanks to COVID, of all things. We can thank COVID for highlighting some situation. Why is this important to companies? Okay, I think any company selling anything, and remember, I'm a marketer and a market researcher, has something to give to caregivers. I'm going to show you some examples of what's out there right now, and I'm going to show you some ideas for what I think companies can do. But literally any category you can name should have something that they can adapt, or even if they don't have products and services, they can at least sponsor, or they can at least take care of their own employees. So the minimum you can do is take care of your own employees. But I'm saying you can make products and services for the caregiver market. Let's look at what's out there. So this is like a home emergency save your care receiver kit. This is a life alert type device that you wear. So if you fall down, somebody will know. This is a pager and another monitoring system. So in the monitoring area, we have lots of products already. Yeah. In the mobility area, we have this, you can't see it so well, but this is a transferring device that you put around your care receiver so that you will not hurt yourself as a care receiver. This is a fabulous thing called a rollator. Now they're not calling them walkers anymore. No, they're calling them rollators. This rollator has this black seat folds down over that toilet ring, and you can use it just like a regular walker, and nobody even knows it. But if you're in a restaurant and you're a care receiver, you have to go to the restroom, you just take your roller right in there to the restroom, and this fits all standard toilets. It's awesome. It's awesome. So there's all kinds of things here, and you can just go on Amazon but I think the disappointing thing is how uncreative it is. It's like, okay, like I would have expected that, right? And I always used to say a long time ago in Japan, when I was talking about the aging population, it's not all wheelchairs, canes, and crutches, right? It's not. And notice that none of these really are for the caregiver. they give the caregiver peace of mind, and they help the caregiver to not strain themselves. But basically, they're pretty expected type things. Now,
Yeah.
there are companies stretching in this space. So you have a lot higher technology coming along nowadays. You have these fabulous platforms that help caregivers amalgamate family data and keep caregivers working. You have robotics that will help with aging in place. So you have people stretching in this space, but generally
Yeah.
speaking, I think it's wide open. And I think two of the big areas where I can see um, is things like respite care, supporting the caregivers with caregiver insurance or vetting services. We don't have very good vetting services to know whether you're hiring a criminal to come in your house, right? That's a big problem if you're hiring professional help. We if for resources, there's huge opportunity.
Huge.
If you were a bricks and mortar retailer with good distribution and outlets, why not have digital kiosks that would allow your customers to access valuable information, and you could help connect them to community resources? Home Depot could offer caregiver supply closet design. Sponsoring events and training, that's a gimme. That's an easy thing any company can do. These are just really scratching the surface. I would like to actually share with you what I think is a fabulous example of a major company taking its core product line and modifying it with a new product for caregivers. So I'm going to
Let's
play
have a
this
look.
now. Yep. Oh, I think it's this one.
Good morning, sir. Ready to get up? Let me get your feet up. How you doing today? Okay. Good morning. I remember always looking at my dad's arms like when I was like 8, 9, 10 years old. He had arms like Popeye. He was a tugboat captain, and I so admired his physique. And now it's a different story, And that's just the way it is. So my dad had a stroke, and now he can't get around, he can't walk. And he needs me to help him out. And my son Luke and I have been doing it. And I'd do anything for him. I can give you a really good mohawk. You look like a punk rocker. There's a definite role reversal that happens. I have to wake him up in the morning and take care of him and groom him and shave him and shower him. It's actually an honor to do that for your father, because he did it for me when I was a kid. My dad's got the greatest face. His squishy face is just amazing. He's sort of thin-skinned, and I don't want to cut it at all. So I got to be careful with that face. Like, he'll just say, do this, do that. You got to make sure that you shave my neck down. You got to do my lips up. He was really particular about his sideburns. That's where your sideburns start? Okay. I'm not going to touch your sideburns. Okay, good. Okay? How am I doing so far, Dad? Okay. It takes me like a half an hour to shave my father because I have to be so careful. Can't live without it either. Okay, I will. Oh, there we go. Okay, good. I love that face. Hi. I'm one of the lucky ones. A lot of my friends my age do not have their dads, and I still have my dad. He always says to me, he looks up at me after I pour love on him for the whole day, and he says, I don't know what I did to deserve you. And I say, Dad, I got you. I got you, Dad.
very beautiful.
So yes, and I know we're getting short on time, but I really wanted to show that because it's such a wonderful example of sensitively, not tone deaf advertising, right? It's like awesome for me, and it always makes me cry. So I just really like it a lot, and I just to see a guy as well doing the caregiving is a really wonderful thing. Um, just like to talk a minute about like how can companies start thinking about this? Well, build questions into your strategy planning. Ask how can we modify or adapt our existing products like Gillette did. How can we truly innovate with new offerings in this space, and how can we serve the needs of our employee caregivers, which we're going to talk about next, and onward to the communities where we do business. I'm going to give you an example in the end of how a company has helped and is helping in its community. So we also talked about how the news has been picking up on this. And Dave, I was so happy to hear about the radio show that you heard today. PBS, that's the public broadcasting system in the States. I'm sorry, I am in the States, so I that's what I'm seeing and hearing. And if it's happening here, it'll happen other places, I believe. So I think it's starting, and we are all part of that change. But this fast forward documentary is really good if you can get your hands on it. It's about pairs of baby boomer and millennial sets of parent and kids who are put into immersive experiences so they can feel what it feels like to age with MIT's aging suit, and they're also forced to talk about things. And it's a really well done documentary, and I think it really helped these folks and anyone that you watch it with. The other thing is this Forbes AARP. These both happened in the same week, last week of March.
Yeah.
And the On the Verge webinar was featuring 4 companies: Viacom, CBS, S&P Global, TIAA Financial, and a tech company called Care Validate, who all spoke up. Their people managers and their HR VPs were on this webinar talking about what their companies are doing to help their caregiving employees. So I'm so delighted to see this kind of action because I think it's time and very important. When we talk about what's happening in workplaces, we are talking about hidden costs that are annual costs right now, 68 billion, that are going up to 145 billion a year for the next 30 years. And these are hidden costs related to absenteeism, presenteeism, not being present when you're there, and also high turnover rate and people leaving because they just cannot handle it anymore. So it's a huge burden on companies, and it's becoming more of a burden. Again, 30% of every workforce in the States. So it could vary a little bit in different countries, but I don't think it's going to be far off the 20-25% mark, especially with the long-term pandemic.
Huge.
And this is, yeah, huge. And I thank the pandemic for bringing the problems that are related to caregivers to the fore. Caregivers are invisible. They are behind the curtain. We talked a little bit about this.
Yeah.
They're here, but we don't have the eyes to see them. And I find that really sad. And again, I'm just ready to talk about this for the rest of my life because I think people need to listen, and I'm just going to keep talking because it's important. So let's look at some strategies and solutions for companies in terms of transforming the workplace. Many companies are already on this road. I gave you 4 examples before. It's not like nobody's doing this. It's just that we need more companies doing it, and we need everybody to work deeper. So we need people to start, and we need companies to work deeper. We know from the companies who have already done it that flex time and paid time off and resources and support for caregivers actually result in better retention and even recruiting. The millennials are actually they're very plugged into like this problem, and they look at companies now. They're like, "Oh, what are your caregiving policies?" So that's a really interesting thing, I believe. And I think that we will see more and more of that going forward. There are things that companies can do, really easy things. The good news is that none of this really cost a lot of money in the big scheme of things with the money that companies spend on everything. We're talking about surveying your employees and identifying who's a caregiver because they don't identify so easily, to create an environment where you would be rewarded or thought well of for doing the right thing. Reviewing and assessing what is most needed in your company. We already know a lot of that from the research, but of course, it's good to listen to your own employees and come up with a customized situation for yourself. You can also repurpose a lot of existing programs. For example, there are a lot of programs already for working moms, like job sharing, that can absolutely be repurposed for caregiver needs. And starting the dialogue between leaders and employee caregivers so that people feel heard and appreciated. I think these, again, getting started is the most important thing right now. I'm very much interested in starting that. These are some of my favorite beyond the legal requirements, right? Like every company in the States has to offer Family Medical Leave Act, but they only have to offer a certain percentage.
Mhm.
And some states you can get tax credits. There's different things in different states, and that'll be different country by country. Please do more than what you're legally
Yeah.
required to do. Really, are you just doing the bare minimum? I think that's pathetic, but that's me. I love this emergency backup care example. I love a digital concierge where you're an employee, you can call your company's paid for service, a digital concierge that helps you understand your options when your mother has fallen and broken her hip. I love offering time and space for self-led support groups, training, let's say, one of your Alzheimer's caregivers in your company to do a little group, a support group once a week or once a month with other Alzheimer caregivers in your company. And you can easily train somebody to do that. Just simple, non-judgmental moderation, and it becomes a support group that can be self-led. A time bank where non-caregiving employees actually donate hours so that caregiving employees can dip into that when their paid time runs out. I love that idea. And some companies are doing these things, Steve. So it really is exciting. And using the company intranet and employee publications to celebrate caregivers, to introduce that guy who was caregiving for his dad as a hero. He's a hero. So I love the idea. And you could provide access, information, all kinds of things on a company intranet.
Okay.
So that is, I raced through that last because I wanted to leave us some time for Q&A. I love this quote by Rosalind Carter. There's only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. And I think we're all in this boat. I'd like to make it a little better. That's what I'm trying to do.
Thank you so much, Debbie.
Yeah, that was really, really good. I think I just want to say 2 things. First of all, on one of the previous charts, you mentioned this about sharing inside companies. And I think the idea that organizations sharing inside information, as you say, maybe work groups or sharing groups, etc., is a really good idea. And then reflect that in what you can be doing, as you said, with product development or service that you can actually become part of your business. We saw this, I started to see this about 15 years ago, first in Japan, not surprisingly, with aging, where some FMCG companies started to take some normal products and just by simple relabeling information on the pack, were able to point out how that product was relevant now for the over 65 population. And I think there's a lot of products that people could think about how they could fairly simply just turn it around in terms of, okay, well, this will help carers or the cared in ways you hadn't thought about, and maybe make life a little bit easier. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. I also wanted to just pick up on something Debbie mentioned, which was I mean, you mentioned things like Home Depot or I guess IKEA or there's a huge in Australia. There's a huge DIY retailer called Bunnings. Those sorts of organisations, those sorts of retailers, would become obvious places for how to, help with the physicality of things. What to do about the home, your living conditions. But we'll always go back, Steve. I think because of the basis of where we're coming from and what we do, pharmacies. I mean, it would. There's obviously a lot of ways in which pharmacy chains could be contributing, but also thinking about the way they can grow their business by doing this.
I think not just chains, Dave, but all pharmacies, even independent pharmacies, have played in the past a really important role in supporting and providing access to information and products for caregivers, but even more so in the future now, I think. Yeah.
Well, I love the idea of pharmacy and drugstore chains getting involved. And it's true, it doesn't have to be a chain, but the chains have the power because of the bricks and mortar locations to literally provide counseling services. They could do anything out of that space. They could have a whole caregiver aisle or section in the store. They could package products. They can do like a starter kit for a caregiver. I mean, there were things that I needed right away that I had never even heard of or bought. I used to go into the Walgreens and the CVS here in the States and it was a whole new world for me because I had never looked at those things before. And I think it's fascinating, actually, and a great opportunity. And I just want to mention one other thing with that kind of bricks and mortar type leveraging. You can also work with the community. So I wanted to mention one more good example of a company, Sanofi, who has actually done an amazing job in their local community in New Jersey, in the States. They have teamed up with their company, their foundation, and the United Way, which is a nonprofit social helping organization here in the States, to provide not only help and access to resources to their employees, but also to the community. Yeah. And that's where we start getting some real traction on this, because there's just so much opportunity.
Yeah. Debbie, in the last couple of minutes, what would be your 3 key takeaways or advice that you would give the listeners, the companies that they represent, the teams they represent? What would you give them as a summary of today?
Okay, here are my 3 top points. I want people to open their eyes to this challenge. This is real. It is not easy to look at. I've had friends tell me to stop talking about it because they can't take it. And that bothers me, right? Because it seems to me that sticking your head in the sand is not the answer. So I want people to open their eyes. I want companies to recognize the negative impacts that this could have on their employees, on a large percentage of their employees and workforce, and get started with exploring how to mitigate the risks. And then number 2, to look first at repurposing existing programs in your organization. Again, it does not have to cost a lot of money. This is heart work. This is like common sense heart work, right? And if you really care, then show you care by doing some easy steps that you can take to make this happen. And third, I really would love it if companies would start looking at how they can target and create products that are targeting caregivers. Of course, I want products for care receivers as well, but honestly, self-care, health and wellness products for caregivers could be amazing. And a lot of times, David, it is just a messaging tactic. It's just a matter of wow, this could be good for caregivers. Yeah. Why don't we help them understand that?
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much for that.
there's three free downloads that anyone can get. This is an employer's guide to workplace support for family caregivers that I co-wrote. It's got a lot of statistics and a lot of the same things that I've said today, but in more depth because it's a book. It's about a 20-page ebook. There's a caregiving resource guide for individuals with my favorite suggestions for websites and books and all kinds of things for the planning stage, the surviving and thriving stage, and the relaunching when caregiving is done stage. And also there's self-care and COVID in there. So we've expanded it for that reason. And you can download a deck from this presentation, the PDF of the deck. And then I'm offering 3 gifts of my book, which is on Amazon. And of course, you're welcome to order a paperback book. If you want the first 3 people who let CHC, Steve and Aim and Dave know, will receive, you can choose a signed paperback book, or you can choose a Kindle copy. I'll send it to you from Amazon, whichever you choose, but first 3, so get your request in there.
Yes, indeed. If you want to be fast and get on the chat, please do that now and get a copy. So the first 3 requests for either a Kindle version or a signed copy of the book. That's so, so kind.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I really, really enjoyed it. And yeah, hope we can do it again.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Thank you so much, Dave. I think we'll pass it back over to Aim, who will sign us off. And thanks everyone for staying with us.
Wow, what a great session. Thank you so much. I would like to say thank you, Debbie, Dave, and Steve, for such a powerful, inspiring section. We truly hope that this session will help inspire you to think about how we can help support the family caregivers so that they are informed, inspired, and empowered, and no longer invisible. Thank you, everyone, and please connect with us at the Consumer Healthcare Training Academy on LinkedIn, and we hope to see you again next time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.